Hi chaps, I do hope you've been enjoying the Greek gods and goddesses stories that I've put on YouTube for you to help you really get under the skin of our topic on ancient Greece. And I'm going to continue that today with the birth of Athena. It's called Naming the City, and that's the illustration that goes alongside the story in the book today. Zeus's headache got worse and worse until one day he said, "My head is splitting," and he was right. A great throbbing crest swelled across the crown on his head, and when he smacked his fist against it, it split open, and out rose a woman. She was fully grown, fully dressed, fully armed. In fact, she was clad in armour, with helmet, shield and spear, and she came into the world along a shoot of light so dazzling that for a time no one in the courts of heaven could move or speak or think, except to think, "A new goddess has been born today." The disk of heaven and the disk of earth trembled like cymbals stuck together, and Helios stopped the sun chariot, stock still in the sky to stare. The goddess's mouth was open, and a cry, a battle cry, set the fish swimming, shimmering in the sea below. Then the warrior woman closed her mouth, struck the pavements of Olympus 3 times with the butt of her spear, and freed the gods from their trance, like sleepwalkers startled awake. Her eyes were a silver grey, and when she looked at her father Zeus, knew at once how long she had lain nestled against his brain unborn. "You are the daughter of Metis, my first wife," he said in amazement, mixed with delight. Suddenly the prophecy that Metis' child would be greater than him no longer seemed such a terrible threat to Zeus. He had always imagined a son. So Zeus did not open his mouth and swallow her, as he had in fact swallowed her mother. He did not banish her from heaven. In fact, from the day of her birth, she was like his dearest child, Pallas Athena. "Dear grey eyes," he calls her, said Poseidon, as sour and surly as ever, among the draughty currents of the deep sea. The others call her mighty, champion, warlike one, protector of little children, goddess of the city. Well, she won't be goddess of my city, and she needn't think she will. By his city, Poseidon meant the new marvellous city being built by King Cecrops as a lesson to the world in civilised living. In time, it would be home to thousands with a host of lovely buildings, senate houses, theatres, covered markets and bath houses. At present, it had 2 rivers and the Acropolis, a hill of resplendent beauty waiting just to be crowned with a temple. There's a picture of the hill there, look. And those of you that have seen the picture of the Acropolis can imagine what it was just on the hill before it was actually this beautiful city. And that's real because that's there. Don't forget, these are the myths. But to which of the gods would King Cecrops dedicate his perfect city? "It's only 4 miles from the sea. Of course it must be mine," said Poseidon, striking his trident on the floor of heaven. "And yet I would rather like it myself," said the grey-eyed goddess standing beside Zeus's throne. Zeus wanted Athena to have it, but thought it best to ask King Cecrops to choose. After all, the man had taught humankind how to worship the gods properly, so he would clearly make a wise choice, and he could take the blame rather than Zeus for offending either Poseidon or Athena. Cecrops was sent for and asked, "Which god shall be the patron of your new city and give its name, and the temple on the hill of Acropolis? Shall it be Poseidon or grey-eyed Athena?" Cecrops plucked at his lower lip and considered. He could see the barbs of Poseidon's trident twinkling. He could see the eagles glistening on the breastplate of Athena's armour. "I shall dedicate the city to whomever grants it the most useful present." Hardly were the words spoken before Poseidon drove off full tilt in his turtle-shell chariot. He split the sea as he entered, and he galloped in frantic circles around the amphitheatres of the undersea, so as to set the ocean spinning. Up from his stables came his white-maned storm horses, clashing their silver hoofs, stampeding over the sea's surface with arched necks and flaring nostrils. Choosing the very finest of the steeds, Poseidon moulded its watery bulk into solid horseflesh and let it ashore on the Aegean Sea, the world's first horse of flesh and blood. "This beast I give you, Cecrops, and all its 4-footed foals for evermore. From now on, your merchants may transport their goods in horse-drawn wagons, your soldiers charge into battle on horseback, your farmers plough their fields without a pick." Cecrops stopped and clapped. He could imagine no better present. And behind him, the gods and goddesses of Olympus, ranged like the judges at the trial, were clearly as impressed. Poseidon's city it would be then. Then all of a sudden Athena was standing on the crest of the hill in the Acropolis, spear in hand. No, this time it was not a spear that she was holding, but a little tree. As she thrust it into the ground, it grew and it spread its branches, leaves the shape of a spearhead, fruit and green, black as grapes. This is an olive tree, she said. You may eat its fruit or crush it and make oil to cook by, to light your houses, to flavour your meats, and the bread. Its leaves are soft to sleep on, and its shade as cool as water at noon. And at once Cecrops, as tasted the olives, he had to agree that life would never be the same for anyone who had not tasted them. The name of my city will be Athena, said King Cecrops, and the temple on the Acropolis shall be the Parthenon, temple to the immortal maid Athena. A rumble shook the assembly of dignitaries, which seemed to come far below the earth, but which really came from Poseidon's throat. He growled the growl of a ship floundering, of a sea monster grating his teeth. And here's a picture of the horse that Poseidon had created for Cecrops. And above you can see the picture of Athena there with her olive tree. And that's a really famous tree. That's still there to this day. Let's see what's happening underneath. Boulders at the bottom of the sea grinding each other to the sand. Then his hand jerked and his trident flew and it struck the hill of Acropolis like the flank of a whale. Out of the wound spurted salt water, not just a spring but a fountain, a geyser, a gushing of seawater pluming into the sky, then falling back to the head of the assembled immortals. Soon the ground was muddy, the puddles joined into lakes, and the whole coastal plain disappeared beneath a flood which stretched all the way to the sea. Huge waves rolled in off the 5 oceans and moved on unhindered into the Thracian plain, submerging crops, destroying houses, drowning animals who could not reach higher ground. Huddled together at the top of the Acropolis, their arms round each other's waists, the Olympians and King Cecrops looked out over the greatest flood in the history of their world and wondered at the jealousy of the sea god. You can see them all there, looking together. Enough. You are a selfish and peevish bully, brother, declared Zeus, pointing his Aegeus at the flood and drying it up in great twisting columns of steam. You shall pay back to the people of Athena for this wanton destruction of yours. In place of soft waves, you shall deal for a time in hard, dry stones. In place of your cold deeps, you may labour for a while in the hot sun to earn gold as they have to each day. And as for sending the flood, Poseidon was made to spend 7 years building the walls of the city. Not Athens, it was a citadel with a wall 20 metres high and 5 metres thick, made of shining stone. No weapon must breach it, no attacker scale it. It was to be the great fortress city of the world. It was Troy. Have you heard of Troy? Hermes asked the motionless form of Argos, who sees all. The monster writhed its gigantic body, piling coil upon coil around the white calf, as if to say, I am the walls of Troy. No weapon can breach me. No attacker climb over to steal what I guard, least of all you. So Hermes told another story, the city of Troy. Every time I read one of these stories, it really helps me understand a little bit about ancient life in Greece, but also how things came about. So of course we know now that the olive tree didn't come from Athena, who was trying her best to ingratiate herself with the king so that they could name the city after her. But it's a really interesting myth that helps us realise how they've got their culture in ancient Greece. Join me next time for the immortal blacksmith, Hephaestus and Aphrodite.